Have you ever watched someone destroy the person they claim to love, piece by piece, so slowly that even the person being destroyed didn't notice until there was almost nothing left? Have you ever seen a man stand in a room full of people, smiling, shaking hands, accepting praise, while the woman beside him wore long sleeves in July? Have you ever wondered what happens when someone who has been silenced for years finally finds a way to make the truth louder than anything money can buy? This is the story of Celeste Adair. And it does not end the way he expected. Celeste was 26 when she married Dominic Rourke. She was a junior architect at a firm in Vancouver, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and immediately see how the space could be better. More light here, less obstruction there. Open this up, tear that wall down. She had good instincts, she trusted them. She trusted them the day she met Dominic at a charity gala in Gastown, when he walked up to her holding 2 glasses of champagne and said, "You're the only person in this room who looks like they actually belong here." She had laughed, she had taken the glass. Dominic Rourke was 41. He was the kind of handsome that photographed well. Strong jaw, silver at his temples, suits that cost more than Celeste's monthly rent. He ran a private equity firm out of a tower on Burrard Street, the kind of firm whose name you saw engraved in lobbies. He was charming in the way that certain men are charming. Completely and on purpose. They dated for 8 months. He was attentive, generous, present. He remembered small things. The name of her favorite bookstore in Kits, the way she took her coffee, the birthday of her younger sister Petra. He sent flowers to her office on a Tuesday for no reason. He flew her to Montreal for a long weekend, and took her to dinner at a restaurant where you needed to book 3 months in advance. Celeste's mother said, "He seems wonderful." Petra said, "He's almost too good." Celeste said, "Stop looking for problems." She married him on a Saturday in September. The ceremony was at a vineyard in the Okanagan. The photographs were beautiful. The first time he heard her, they had been married for 4 months. It was a small thing. That is always how it starts. She had forgotten to cancel a reservation at a restaurant they were no longer going to, and the restaurant had charged a cancellation fee. Dominic found the charge on the statement and came into the kitchen where Celeste was making tea, and his voice, when he spoke to her, was so cold and so flat that she went completely still. He didn't raise it. He didn't need to. He leaned against the counter and explained to her, very quietly, exactly how thoughtless she was, how careless, how for someone who was supposedly intelligent, she had a remarkable ability to disappoint him. She apologized, she made excuses, she told herself it was stress. He had a big deal closing that week, he was under enormous pressure. But the pressure never really lifted. There was always something. A dinner she'd overcooked. A comment she'd made at a party that he felt was embarrassing. A dress he didn't like. A friend he thought she spent too much time with. The silences that would fill their apartment like cold water, rising slowly, until she would do almost anything to make them stop. By the time the silences became something else. A hand around her wrist, hard enough to leave a ring of bruise. A shove in the hallway that sent her shoulder into the doorframe. Celeste had already spent a year learning to make herself small. She had already stopped calling Petra as often. She had already started measuring her words before she spoke them. She told herself he loved her. She told herself she knew him, the real him, the man who sometimes, in the early mornings before he was fully awake, would reach for her hand in the dark. She was wrong about what that meant. Dominic Rourke had a partner at his firm named Sloane Whitfield. Celeste had met her at company events, tall, precise. The kind of woman who always seemed to be waiting for someone to prove they were worth her time. She never seemed to like Celeste very much, and Celeste had chalked it up to professional territoriality, the way some people guard the people they work closely with. It took Celeste almost 2 years to understand that what Sloane was guarding was not professional. She found out the way you find out things you've been not quite looking for, by accident. A message that appeared on Dominic's phone when he'd left it face up on the kitchen island. She hadn't been trying to look, but she saw enough. She should have been devastated. She was, but not in the way she expected. Underneath the sick drop in her stomach was something else. Something that felt, disturbingly, like clarity. Like a window being opened in a room she'd almost gotten used to not breathing in. She didn't confront him. She had learned by then that confrontation, with Dominic, only ever ended one way. She took a photo of the screen with her own phone. She saved it, and she started thinking very carefully about what came next. Celeste's sister Petra was a family lawyer in Calgary. They had not spoken properly in almost a year. Dominic had managed that the way he managed everything, through small persistent pressures, a comment here, a silence there, until Celeste had started to feel like calling her sister was more trouble than it was worth. She called her on a Thursday afternoon in February, while Dominic was in Toronto for a deal. She sat in the bathroom with the fan running and spoke quietly into the phone. Petra didn't say "I told you so." She didn't say anything for a long moment, and then she said, "Tell me everything. And Celeste, don't leave anything out." Celeste told her everything. Petra listened. When Celeste finished, Petra said, "Okay, here's what we're going to do." The plan took 3.5 years. Celeste knew that was the part that would be hardest for people to understand. Why she stayed, why she kept going back to that apartment and sleeping in that bed and sitting across from him at dinner tables. She understood why it looked like weakness from the outside. From the inside, it looked like survival. From the inside, she was building something. Petra had connected her with a lawyer in Vancouver, a woman named. It doesn't matter what she was named. What matters is that she was brilliant and thorough, and she had handled cases like this before. She told Celeste that documentation was everything, that a feeling was not a case, but a record was. So Celeste started keeping one. She used an old phone Petra had mailed her, tucked inside a hollowed-out novel on the third shelf of the bookcase in her home office. She documented dates, times, descriptions. She photographed bruises in her office bathroom under fluorescent light. She kept a folder, encrypted, in a cloud account Dominic didn't know existed, under an email address she'd created from a public library computer on a Tuesday morning when she told him she was running errands. She was meticulous. She was patient. She was, in those 3.5 years, quietly becoming the most organized version of herself she had ever been. Because she had a reason to be. There were moments when she almost broke. A night in March, her second year of documentation, when it was worse than it had ever been, and she sat on the bathroom floor for a long time afterward and thought about all the ways this could end. She called Petra. Petra answered on the second ring. They talked until the sun came up. "You don't have to go back out there," Petra said. "Say the word and we move now." "Not yet," Celeste said. "I need more time." She was not going to let him walk away clean. She was not going to leave with nothing but her word against his. She had watched what happened to women who did that. Women with less documentation, less support, less of a plan. She had watched what money and lawyers and the right connections could do to a story. She was not going to be a story that got taken apart. She was going to be a record. By the third year, she had compiled something extraordinary. Petra's lawyer contact had reviewed everything twice. They had dates, photographs, medical records. Celeste had started seeing a doctor at a clinic across town, a clinic she paid for in cash, a doctor she'd chosen carefully and who had been documenting her injuries under a flag in her private file. They had the messages from Sloane's phone. They had emails Celeste had found and photographed, correspondence between Dominic and a financial advisor that suggested he had been moving assets into accounts that were not reflected in any of the joint financial statements he had shown Celeste over the years. Petra had brought in a forensic accountant, just to look, just to see. What the forensic accountant found was a second architecture. A shadow structure of shell companies and redirected income that Dominic had been building for years. Whether it predated their marriage or began during it, the accountant couldn't say for certain. What she could say was that it was substantial and hidden. "He's been preparing for this too," Petra told Celeste on the phone. "He just didn't know you were preparing faster." The moment Celeste chose was a Wednesday. It was not dramatic, the way she chose it. She had a meeting that morning at her firm. She had gone back to work full-time 2 years earlier. Another thing Dominic had resented, another argument she had absorbed, and she sat through the meeting and then she walked to her car and she drove to a hotel in Kitsilano that she had booked under Petra's name a week earlier. She did not take much. She had moved most of what mattered, slowly, over the preceding 3 months. Documents, jewelry her grandmother had left her, a small amount of cash withdrawn in small amounts over many weeks. She took the encrypted phone. She took her passport. She left her wedding ring on the kitchen counter, next to his coffee maker, in the exact spot where he would see it first thing. By the time Dominic came home that evening, Celeste was in Calgary. By the time he realized she wasn't coming back, she had already been sitting in Petra's kitchen for 6 hours, eating soup and looking out the window at the February snow. He called 31 times that first night. She counted. She didn't answer a single one. What happened next moved faster than Celeste had expected, and slower, and both of those things at once. Dominic filed for divorce within 2 weeks. He was aggressive, through his lawyers, accusatory, controlling in every way the legal system allowed. He contested the asset claims. He hired a private investigator, which she expected. He tried to discredit her professionally, which she also expected. He was a man accustomed to winning by applying enough pressure. He had never met a situation where the other side had been quietly applying counterpressure for 3.5 years. Petra's team filed the documentation. All of it, the photographs, the medical records, the correspondence, the forensic accounting, the messages. Dominic's lawyer called Petra's lawyer within 48 hours of receiving it. Celeste was in Petra's living room when Petra came out of her office and sat down across from her. Petra had the expression of someone trying very hard not to smile in a situation that called for gravity. "They want to talk," Petra said. "I know," Celeste said. "The settlement took 4 months to finalize. Celeste will not talk about the specific terms, and that is her right. What she will say is that she walked out of that process with enough to start over completely, which she did. She bought a small house in East Vancouver. Nothing like the apartment on Burrard, nothing like what she'd had, and exactly what she wanted. She went back to her firm and she told her direct supervisor, in broad terms, what had happened, and her supervisor said nothing for a moment and then said, "I wondered. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner." Celeste told her there was nothing she could have done. She wasn't sure that was entirely true, but she believed the apology was. She began seeing a therapist who specialized in coercive control. The first session, she mostly talked about her work. The second session, she cried for 40 minutes straight. By the fourth session, she was starting to understand the shape of what had happened to her. Not just the acute events but the long, slow erosion, the way it had been designed to make her stop trusting herself. She started trusting herself again. It took time. It was not a straight line. Dominic Rourke's professional fall was not public in the way that some falls are. There was no news article, no viral moment. It was quieter and in some ways more complete. The forensic accounting had opened a thread that regulatory bodies and his own investors were not prepared to let go of. An internal audit at his firm turned into an external one. 2 of his most significant investors withdrew. A business partner he'd worked with for over a decade quietly distanced himself, in a way that the financial community noticed even if the general public did not. Sloane Whitfield resigned from the firm in March. She did not say why publicly. People speculated. By autumn of that year, the firm had been significantly restructured. Dominic's name was no longer on the letterhead. Celeste found out from Petra, who had heard from a contact in Vancouver's financial community. She was sitting in her backyard when Petra told her, drinking coffee and watching the neighbor's cat walk along the fence. "How do you feel?" Petra asked. Celeste thought about it. "Like I can breathe," she said. "Just like I can breathe." She thinks about the woman she was in that bathroom in February, on the cold tile floor, watching the light come in under the door. She thinks about how small everything had gotten, how she had been so accustomed to surviving, that she had almost forgotten she was also allowed to live. She is 31 now. She has a home. She has her work, which she is good at and which she loves. She has Petra, who she talks to on the phone most Sundays. She has a therapist and a book club, and a dog named Henry who takes up most of the bed and has no remorse about it. She has the habit, still, of noticing the structure of a space when she walks into it. Where the light comes from, what's blocking it, what could be opened up. It's the thing she was trained to do, and it has never left her. She still believes that most spaces can be improved, that there is almost always more light available than what you can currently see. She built a record because she needed to. She survived because she chose to. And she is the one, in the end, who got to decide how the story was told. He never saw it coming. That was the thing about Dominic Rourke. He had spent so many years believing he was the only one in the room who understood how power worked. He had never once considered that the woman beside him was watching, taking notes, waiting. Celeste Adair had always been good at seeing how a space could be better. She just needed time to figure out how to tear the right wall down.